Okay, I guess we can start then. Thank you for coming. My name is Niels Ferguson. I will be talking about rijndael, or AES as it's now called. My talk will be the combination of two separate papers. One is the paper listed over here, the improved cryptoanalis of rijndael, which is joint work with John Kelsey, Stefan Lux, Rijndael, rijndael, David Wagner, and Doug Whiting. That was published last year at FSC 2000. And the second paper I will be talking about is a simple algebraic representation of rijndael. That's joint work with Richard Trouble and Doug Whiting. And it will be published next week at SAC in Canada. It's going to be a little bit of a technical talk. But before we get there, I need to make something very clear. I'm biased. I'm one of the designers of Two Fish, which lost in the final to rijndael. Also, I spent several months of my life trying to break rijndael, and once you spend that much effort on a cipher, you start to try and see weaknesses everywhere. It's one of the reasons why I like rijndael. I'll start out with explaining a bit about rijndael, how it works. And to do that, I first need to explain a little bit about finite fields. And particularly a finite field called GF to the 8th. A finite field is nothing but math speak for a set of numbers you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It sounds complicated, but all of your high school algebra works here. So if you don't know about finite fields, just pretend they're numbers, and it'll work fine. This particular finite field has exactly 256 elements, which is really nice because the numbers are basically byte values. The addition in the field is an exclusive OR operation. And for the rest of the talk, when I talk about addition or sums, I actually mean exclusive OR. As a mathematician, that makes perfect sense. For you, you'll just have to live with it now. And multiplication in the finite field is not an operation that's easily accessible on a general purpose machine. It is very much like a modular multiplication, but stretch out all the carries in your ALU. So you have to trick around a bit to implement this efficiently. There's one other aspect of the finite field that I'll talk about, and that's squaring. I hope you all know that a plus b squared equals a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. And like I said, like any of your high school algebra works in this field, except that our addition is an exclusive OR. And so there's the middle terms, you're XORing the same value in twice. So it turns out actually to be the case that a plus b squared is a squared plus b squared. This is known as the freshman's dream. For very obvious reasons. It's a standard mistake by freshman math students. So, how does rijndael work? Well, let's have a look in detail. This is a graphical depiction of two rounds of rijndael. The matrix is up here, and these are the steps of the algorithm. To the left, you see these are the key values coming in. And like most block ciphers, rijndael has a key and then expanded to a number of round keys. I won't talk too much about the key expansion. These are just values that you can compute from the key. And to the right, I have these boxes with dashes, and that represents the state. So the value at this point in the computation, I'm going to draw something about in that box. This is the plain text, capital P. And the first step of the algorithm is to add a round key to it. Now the plain text is 16 bytes. And for this algorithm, we arrange it in a 4x4 square. And the whole of rijndael, you have to think in these squares of bytes. The first step is an addition of a round key. And that's a byte by byte value. So we take this key byte, and you add this plain text byte to it, and it ends up in that byte just after the addition. And you do it for each of the 16 bytes. The next step of the round is the S-box. The S-box is an 8-bit lookup table. 8-bit index, you get 8-bit result out. So you take a byte here, you look it up in the S-box, and you put it back in there. And again, you have 16 bytes, so you need to do the 16 bytes. We'll later talk about the details of what is in that S-box, but for this moment, it's just a lookup table. The third step is what's called the shift row. This shifts the various rows and actually rotates them by various amounts. The top row is left in place. The second row is rotated left 1 byte position. The third row is rotated left 2 byte position. And the last row is rotated left 3 byte positions. So if we have this column here, the first byte stays in place, the next byte moves back left 1, this moves back 2, and this moves left 3. So that's how it just redistributes the bytes. And then there's the fourth and last step of each round, that's called the mix column. And that is really, it takes a column here, takes 4 bytes, puts this through the mix column function, and puts it back as a column there. And I'll need to tell you a little bit more about what the mix column function is. Good? I should probably do it like this first. Mix column is a linear operation. You have 4 input bytes, A0, A1, A2, A3, and you just, you compute this sum, and those are the 4 output bytes. I should warn you that the 2's and the 3's in there are actually not integers, 2's and 3's, but they are the field element represented by the integer values 2's and 3's. Most mathematical sophistication that you probably ignore at the moment. As mathematicians, we like to write this as a maybe multiply, because we have this kind of formulas quite often, and so we have our own little special notation for it. Those of you who are familiar with that notation will immediately know what I mean. Those who are not familiar can ignore it. So we take this column here, we run it through that mix column function. We get the 4 columns here, and then we just repeat these operations. We have a key addition, an S-box, a shift row, a mix column. This is 1 round, here's the second round. rijndael has 10 to 14 rounds depending on the key size. Any questions so far? Sorry, what?
Does the matrix have any special properties?
Does the what have any special properties?
The matrix that you are using.
The matrix has some special properties that I will mention as I need them.
It's invertible?
The matrix is invertible, the S-box is invertible. Otherwise you couldn't decrypt.
Yeah, of course.
Any further questions? Anybody who wants to know more about this notation? Okay. Now we'll have to look at the we'll look at the S-box. The S-box is a special construction. I said it was just a lookup table, but it's actually constructed out of 3 individual things. But all I'm just now explaining is what the designers did. The S-box consists of an inversion followed by a bit linear function followed by a constant addition. The inversion is just the 1 over x operation. I told you can divide in this field. You just take 1 over x, so input x, you take 1 over x. That's an output. 0 maps to 0, just to make it complete. So that's the first step of the S-box. Then you have a bit linear function, which basically is you have 8 input bits, and you have 8 output bits, and each output bit is just the XOR of a bunch of the input bits. You have to choose those carefully so that it's invertible. And the addition of a constant, that's just the magic constant that is added or exclusive or to the output. Now, inversion is relatively easy to write mathematically, it's 1 over x. And the bit linear function, it turns out you can write any bit linear function as a polynomial of this form. It took me a little while to understand exactly why that's the case. I'm just going to state it here. ask me later if you want to know why. Note that this is a very special form. This is a polynomial, which we all remember from high school, but all the exponents are powers of 2. And that's going to be really, really useful. And the constant in the S box, we can do away with. The constant is added at the very end of the S box here, to add each and every byte. And this step just rearranges the bytes. So we could just as well add the constant here. At this point. Then we have the mixed column. Now, but remember what the mixed column looks like. If you add a constant to the A's, you might as well add a related constant to the B's. I mean, if you add something to A3, I can compute exactly what numbers to add to the B's. Very key values. So instead of adding these S-box constants here, I can add a related constant down here. Which means I can actually add that constant into the round key. So we can take the constant from the S-box and kind of shove it away into the key schedule. Now we have an equivalent algorithm that does the same computations, just slightly different organized. For our analysis, we're going to assume we've done this for the rest of this part of the paper, of my talk. Basically, it turns out we can ignore the constant in our analysis. So back to the S-box. Having gotten rid of the constant, we can write the S-box. Here we have the 1 over x. That's the inversion. And this is a way of writing this polynomial. We have a sum of some weight times the input to a power of 2. And this is just a straight rewrite that you can do, that we teach people in high school, so I hope you can follow that. And this is worrisome. Here's the S-box, which is the only really kind of complex system in rijndael. And I can write a little formula, this little formula for it. So that's the first part of the observation. Okay, next we are gonna, we have more than just the S-box. The key addition is easy, that's just a plus. The shift row is just a rearrangement of the bytes. The only other difficult operation is the mixed column. So let's look at what the mixed column looks like. This is what mixed column looks like, and we can just write every bi is the sum of some constant times the ai. Mathematicians rewrite of what we have up there. Now we can combine the two results. Suppose we have an S-box followed by a mixed column. Well, here we have, this is the S-box, that's the formula you see here. Except the x is now called AE. And here is this is the formula we have up here. So this is the mixed column applied to the S-box, and we can rewrite this equation as something like this. Where the script E's and D's are the right sets. That's just notational convenience. You'll find a lot of mathematicians do nothing but invent new ways of writing things that we already know, and it doesn't be surprisingly useful to do that. So I consider mathematics to be easy. This is an S-box followed by a mixed column. Now, in the real cipher mix, we don't have the S-box followed by a mixed column. There's a shift row in between. And I'm just going to give you the results of all the detailed analysis that you really should do. This is the formula for one round of rijndael. What you see is the lowercase p are the plaintext bytes. It gets added to a key byte. See, the first step is add a key byte. Then we have the S-box is the S-box and the mixed column are coded in this sum that we saw just now. On this slide. You see the same sum, you see the same constants, you see the input in parentheses to the power to the d1. The shift row is also in there, that's the plus j here that you have to write. I'm not going to go into the details exactly why this is correct. It took me like half a day to get everything right. And the last step is actually adding our keybind, so it's up here. Now let's look at the structure of this formula. There's a lot of detail here that we don't really need. And like I said, mathematicians like to rewrite things to make it look simpler. We can rewrite it like this, where we write a capital C for any constant. So that's just any constant that we know, we know all W's, and we have to keep track of exactly which W, which type is C. Some constant that we know. We just write a capital K, that is some key byte. We know which key byte. I don't really care this matter what, which one. The P is a plain, the star subscript means something like, I know which one of the 16 plain text bytes that is, but for this notation, we don't really care which one. Finally, we have the power here. Now remember the freshman's dream, squaring distributes over addition. And raising something to the power 2 to the d is just repeated squaring. So we can take this power and just put it on the key byte and the index byte separately. And we get some power there, and again, I'm using just by the star, meaning some power of 2 that I can compute, but I don't really want to worry about at this point again what it is. So, so now we just look at the structure of the formula, not the actual. And we get this formula with description of the structure for one round of rijndael. Having done one round, more rounds, and notice that the input here in the round is here. You can just substitute a formula like that for the next round, and you keep doing that. And you get what looks like a hideously complex formula, but actually isn't that difficult. This is 4 rounds of rijndael on a single slide. You see the first round here, that's exactly what we have up there, this the sigma and the k's and the p's and the c's. Add a key, and then you have the next round as input this formula, and you just keep adding rounds like that. And we get a structure of a formula that looks a bit odd. We have lots of divisions, but it's similar to a mathematical set of things that's called continued fractions. And I don't know a lot about them. They kind of taught me just a little bit about what they are. But there's a whole field of mathematics involved in continued fractions, mostly over the real numbers. But maybe some lab ever has done some continued fractions over finite field. I don't know. Note that if we write it for 10 or 14 rounds, the formula just gets a little bit bigger. It's not a whole lot. The formula size is linear in the number of rounds. And this brings me to the first real conclusion of the talk. I can find here. If we use rijndael, we have to trust that nobody can solve these formulas because we get ciphertext pairs. We have plain text here, and after 10 rounds we have ciphertext there. And you can generate, just by getting lots of plain text ciphertext pairs, we can generate a large number of equations in the key bytes. This plain text plus all, in this formula with all these key bytes gives this result. Can we find a way of solving for those key bytes? Now, I don't expect the people here to be really that useful or that knowledgeable about this, because I don't know anything about this, and I don't know anyone who does know anything about it. But it implies that if you use rijndael, you are making an assumption. You are betting your system on the fact that nobody can solve those formulas. This is a completely new complexity assumption. We've never seen this before in a high field. I don't know anyone who's seriously studied this. I generated those formulas, but I haven't studied them because I don't know the math behind them. And you're betting the system that nobody can solve those. Now, maybe somebody can, maybe nobody can now, maybe there's already someone who knows it. Maybe 10 years from now, a quantum science student will solve it. And that's kind of my nightmare scenario. 5 years from now, I'll be sitting at crypto, and the talk starts with somebody saying, I was bored one afternoon and I picked up a book on cryptography that my friend had left, and I found these formulas that looked familiar because I was studying them for some completely unrelated reason. And then half an hour later he ends with, and it took me 30 minutes on my PC to find the key. That's a nightmare. You know, every system with an AES in it would instantaneously be completely useless. And this is also very unfair. Any block cipher could be broken like that. But for rijndael we have these formulas, and there is no other block cipher that has a sort of formula like this. And if not many of you will be well, I've seen a lot of crypto conferences. But cryptographic systems with algebraic structures have been broken in bunches. Only a few survive, like Diffie-Hellman and RSA. Very regularly we get new public key crypto systems, mostly public key crypto systems, which have some algebraic formula, and it takes a number of years until somebody bothers to look at them, and somebody with the right knowledge set and the right tool and break them. So, on one hand, it's a very unfair comment. On the other hand, none of the other ciphers that we know have this avenue of attack even. And I have no idea how hard this is to break or to use. And actually, if I were a betting man, I would probably think that it's more likely that it doesn't lead anywhere than it does. But there's always this fear in my mind. Okay, any questions so far? Yes?
Is there any lower bound to the complexity of this kind of formula?
The question is there no lower bound known to the complexity of this formula? There is no lower bound known in complexity theory, period. Because I spoke to 100 complexity theorists, they have no useful lower bounds. Nobody can give you a function and say, it'll take you at least this long to compute it, other than these trivial things like, you'll have to read the whole input file. And if you do comparison-based sorting, you need to do n log n. But these are absolutely trivial results. There is no non-trivial lower bound in complexity theory that I have been aware of, and I've asked a whole bunch of people. Everybody I meet in complexity theory has asked this question. So no, that is hopeless. There are some attempts to base crypto systems on NP-hard problems, which is doomed to fail because there is no NP-hard problem that's difficult on average. And in cryptography, we need nearly every problem to be hard, whereas in complexity theory, they're only looking at, you have a hard problem if there is even one problem that is not. Completely different approach to complexity. At the end of the talk, I will give you a little bit of my advice on what cipher to choose. And you might be surprised a little bit of that. Okay. No further questions on this part? Yes?
Did you get any comments from the rijndael designers on your conclusion?
They said, oh yeah, looks nice, and we still think it's safe. Yes?
You made deriving the formula look fairly easy. Had you done this before the AIS was finally chosen?
I had this slide up at Crypto last year at the round session. These results were too late to go as formal comments into the NIST system. We showed an outline of this at Crypto at the round session last year, which was before they announced the result of the competition. That might be after they had made that choice. I don't know. NIST said, well, all ciphers are secure because nobody published an attack on them. And that's their way of approaching it. That's really the only criticism that I've had of NIST in the whole process. NIST has done an outstanding job of the AES contest. I want to make it quite clear. And really what we're talking about is the mathematical finance of cryptography. Okay, the second part of my talk, sorry, yes?
rijndael is based on Square and that has been around for some years. And have there been cryptoanalysis and is there quite the same formula in Square like this?
I actually didn't look at Square in this way because rijndael is a lot more interesting. Just like in open source, just the fact that something is public doesn't mean people look at it. Cryptoanalysis gets done by people who like to do it. It's a hobby, really. Even people who get paid In this case, I was paid to go and look at rijndael for 2 months. So I didn't do that. Most ciphers, if you just publish a cipher, the chances are that nobody who has a lot of experience will even bother looking at it, because if it's an unpublished cipher, and I mean unpublished as in a scientific conference, then my attack on it is unpublishable. You know, as a cryptographer, when I do work, I either get paid in real money, or I get paid in publications, which is a reputation game. If I can't get my attack into a conference to the proceedings, it's not worthwhile doing the work. Yes?
I think Square is so close to rijndael that it should be possible to find also in their construction pretty easy right formula. But I have another question. Have you taken a look on the sales? I think there should be a similar effect possible, and your formula regarding on this new resolution.
I haven't looked at Safer. I looked at other ciphers. We did look at other ciphers a bit, and we didn't find anyone where you could write a formula this easy. Safer is an idea, but I have to look at it. But they have exponentiation and logs and addition, and they don't mix very well.
They only use explanation and the inverse to build up this crucial S-boxes.
Yes, that S boxes are relatively straightforward, but they interfere with the FFT layer, which is additions, and if you try and write the formula, I mean, here we have.
You have change of addition and XOR in the layer.
Yes, and here we can take the powers and distribute them over the addition, and otherwise we get a number, some explosion number of states.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's in that form that rijndael and Square, and maybe it's much easier to write out the formula.
Right. Interesting, if you find an algebraic formula for Safer or for Square, that's a separate result, and I think it will be interesting. So now we go to the other talk, which is the cryptoanalysis of rijndael. At least that's what I would call real attacks. Attacks that actually know work. This is an overview of the best known state-of-the-art of attacking rijndael. Column in the first column we have the number of rounds being attacked. Like any box cipher, we just cut out the number of rounds and attack those. The attacks will work for the key size is listed here. This is the number of data that you need, the amount of usually choice of plain text. And this is the time that an attack takes. The first line is the original attack published by the authors of rijndael in their submission paper. The second line is our improvement of that. And as you can see, 6 rounds of rijndael are actually, you can break them on your laptop. And you could have done it this weekend, maybe even. Well, 2 to the 44 isn't that much.
Not much with the laptop.
Right, it's like, you get something like, you get close to 2 to the 44, 2 to the 42 clock cycles per hour on a modern machine. So you're talking about, you actually start counting the computing time in hours. 7 rounds we can attack with these complexities. 8 rounds we can attack only the 192 and 256-bit keys and those complexities. And I'm going to explain the first attack, which is a good introduction about how cryptoanalysis of rijndael. All these attacks work on the same basis, and it's a good introduction on how that works. If I have time left, I will talk about the 9-round attack, which is a related key attack. I'm not sure I'll get that far. You might have to read the paper for that. Okay. Cryptoanalysis of rijndael. The first 2 rounds, round 1 and round 2. No, and I better get this right. We start by guessing a number of key bytes. We guess 4 key bytes in the first round. And in cryptography, when we guess a key byte, we just assume we know it. But you think about, you split yourself in lots of different threads, and each thread takes a different assumption, and one of them will be right and the others will be all wrong. Or you can actually do a loop over all the possibilities, but we're just going to guess these 4 key bytes. And we know the whole plain text, we get to choose the plain text. So we know all of those, and with the exclude 4, we can compute these bytes. And we can actually control those. And the S box is like byte by byte, so we get those 4 bytes. And the shift row rearranges the bytes a bit, and it turns out we get to know this entire column. This is not an accident, I can assure you. The mixed column then, we can compute that column because it's just applied on the column. Now, we can not only compute this, we can actually control these 4 bytes. So we're going to make a very specific choice. We are going to take 1 byte, for example, this one, and I'll use a circle to be that we will make it take on all values. We're going to take 256 plain texts, and we're going to make that byte take on every value exactly once. I'm going to keep the other 3 fixed. How do you do that? Well, you can just choose these bytes and then compute backwards, and as you know the keys, you know which the 4 plain text bytes you have to choose. And the other plain text bytes can just be fixed. I don't care what they are, but they need to have some value. But let's see how this property propagates through the cipher. So all bytes are fixed except this 1 byte takes on all possible values. Well, you add constant to it, that property doesn't change. You apply an S box, it's an invertible table. So again, all the other bytes are fixed, and this byte will take on every value exactly once. The shift row, well, it just rearranges the bytes and ends up here. And now we get to the mixed column. Now here. If you take 1 byte and run it through all possible values, then if you go through the math, it turns out each of the output bytes takes on every value exactly once. If something else will be fixed. So as a property of this NDS matrix, so of this mixed column matrix, we get that the output, each of the output bytes takes on every value exactly once. Okay, we need we go to rounds 3 and 4. This first addition here is exactly the same one as that last addition right there. They overlap it. So we have that these 4 bytes take on every value exactly once. We have a key addition that doesn't change the property. The S box loops up doesn't change the property. The shift row rearranges the bytes like this. And now we have 4 mixed columns, and every mixed column has 3 fixed bytes and 1 byte taking on every value. And just the same as in the last round, we end up every byte taking on every value exactly once. And then I hope you don't mind, I'm going to make it shorthand. Every byte circles all possible values just as we go. Just keep going. S box doesn't change things. The shifter doesn't change things. Now we are sharp. Let's have a look at the mixed column operation. The mixed column is linear. It's a mathematical term. It means if you add 2 inputs, if you apply a mixed column to the sum of 2 inputs, you might as well apply the mixed column to the individual inputs and apply the mixed column and add the results. We have here that if we were to sum all the B's, so we add up all the B bytes that we have to output, that is the same as summing all the 256 A bytes and then applying the mixed column to the result. Now we know that every byte here takes on every value exactly once. So we have the values 0 to 255. If you all sort them together, you get 0. This is easy to check. Now, so if we were to take the bytes here, now we have 256 encryptions, we take 1 byte, these 256 times, we add them all together, the result is going to be 0. I'm going to indicate it with a little sigma symbol. Any questions about this step? I'm sorry, I'm just staring over at the picture. So these bytes take on every value once. These could be all kind of, these bytes could be jumping up and down in some pattern, but if we take all 256, we add them, we get 0. This is another property that this survives. I mean, you add a constant, you just add that constant 256 times, which is an x24, so that you just keep that, big sigma here. That's rounds 3 and 4. Now on to the last 2 rounds. Little time out, and there's 2 things different on the slide than from the previous ones. First of all, there is no mixed column in the last round. That's just how the cipher is defined. It just makes works. Actually, it turns out not to be very useful, doesn't matter. The other thing is I've changed the key addition and the mixed column. Again, you've seen the slide quite a lot. The reason is the mixed column is linear, so instead of adding a value on this side of the mixed column, I can add a related value on the other side of the mixed column. This is because it's linear. So here we are actually adding the key before to the A's, before the mixed column, and that's just equivalent to adding another key, a related key, to the B side. So it's an equivalent representation of the cipher, and this is what we use in a lot of attacks. Now these are rounds 5 and 6. And we have this sigma property here. Now we start working from the back. We have these 256 plain text, we have encrypted all of them, we have 256 ciphertext, and we're now going to work from the back. We are going to guess these 4 output keys. Now we know all the ciphertexts. And so we know all of these. Sorry, no, that's not true. We know only this one, this one, this one, and that one. And so we know that that's actually the same. And this is the shift row, but now we have to do it backwards. So we know exactly these values, we can compute those. The S box works back, we can compute exactly those values. The mixed column, well, we have the whole column, so we can compute backwards through that. Then we guess another key byte, we just guess, for example, this key byte. And then we can compute this byte here. And we go backwards to the shift row, and we can compute this byte here. And we can now compute backwards to the S box, and we can get at that byte there. And now that's how the attack starts to work. Now we can add that byte all the 256 encryptions and check that the result is 0. If we guess the wrong key, then we have a 255 and 256 chance that that sum will not be 0. Because if we guess this key wrong, all our values are going to go all haywire, and there's going to be no relation to the real encryption. So we've guessed a total of 4 bytes at the beginning, 4 here, plus 1 there. That's a total of 9 bytes. And we have a 1 byte check. So we're going to still have a lot of possible key values. But you just go very back to the beginning, get another 256 plain text that change differently this 1 byte.
The ciphertext is known.
Yes, you choose the plain text and then you have encrypted by the machine you're attacking.
So both the plain text and the ciphertext are known.
Yes, actually you get to choose the plain text. You ask the thing you are attempting to encrypt it, and you get the ciphertext back. That is the standard, one of the very standard models of attacking cryptography systems. Sorry? The comment here is it's a very strong model. A lot of people think that this doesn't happen in practice, but it does. If you have an email exploder, you have a forwarder, it takes an email from me and it encrypts it and sends it somewhere else. I can choose that email, I can write it, and then I can listen in on what you said on the other side. If you have a website and you do an SSL connection to it, I might be able to write a write a comment that appears on the website somewhere. I can choose that comment. There's a very large number of systems where in practice you can actually choose the input and get the output from the cipher.
So right, if there are some scenarios possible, but almost the worst practical scenario you can have. And
No, there are actually much harsher models than this one.
yeah.
Okay, we'll take this discussion offline, I think. If any question, I was going through this a little bit fast maybe. Any step that somebody would like to see repeated, what I don't understand. Everybody understood it? That's amazing. Yes?
At the end, you move the next column to the fifth round to the sixth round.
Yes.
So it's not what you see.
Sorry, what?
Leave away the next column. Doesn't that make your formula?
You talk about the swapping of the key addition and the mixed column there.
And leave away the next column at the end.
Okay, this mixed column is just absent in the original cipher specification. That's just what the designer did. If you look at the cipher spec, there isn't the mixed column in the last round. This here I have, you take these two operators, the mixed column and the key addition, and it turns out that adding this key after the mixed column is equivalent mathematically to adding you can compute a key from this one that you can add before the mixed column. So you don't add the same key. You take this key and you mangle it a bit, and then you add it before the mixed column. That turns out to be mathematically the same function. And it's a different representation of the same function, and the representation makes it easier to attack. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, there.
I didn't get the last check between in the fifth round. How do I check if I can control this byte and the others get sum to zero? How can I check if I get the right key?
Okay. So the question is, how do you actually do this check up here where we have guessed the right keys? We have guessed 9 key bytes. Let's assume that we're, usual case we'll have guessed wrong. We have these 256 plain text, we have 256 ciphertext. We compute, for all those 256 encryptions, we compute this byte back, and we apply the inverse S-code, and we add it here. Now, with the probabilities are that we're not going to get 0 there. And then we know that we have made a wrong key guess. But there is a small chance, 1 in 256, that we're going to get a 0 there. And we're still not sure we have the right key. But what we do is we take another 256 plain texts. So we go very back to the very, very first beginning. If I can still find that slide. No. Oh, it's somewhere around here, never mind. We go back to the very first beginning. Take another 256 plain texts. And we have the same key guesses. So we do this computation, we get 256 ciphertext, we compute backwards, and again we get this byte which is sum to 0. And again, the probabilities are that we're going to find that the key is wrong. And we need about 9, 10, 11 of these sets of plain texts to find the one right guess for our key bytes. And of course, it's a partial attack. Once we know once we've done this whole attack, we found a few of the key bytes. But in cryptographic systems, that's always good enough. Once you have found this key byte, you can go and search for. You can get some other key bytes here, or you can get the other key bytes here, and the whole thing starts to fall apart pretty quickly. Yes.
So the key byte that you add.
This one?
5 and 6, yeah. This one byte depends on 4 actual key bytes, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so you need 4 key bytes. You guess 4 key bytes there.
No, I guess the results. I have 4 of the round key bytes, and you apply the inverse matrix, inverse mixed column. I don't need to guess all the 4 key bytes that go in. I only guess one of the bytes that comes out. And this is why this representation is easier to attack. You win a factor of 223 there. Yes?
How resistant is rijndael to partially known key attacks? So like once you start to know a little bit of it, it starts to fall apart much quicker. How quickly does it fall apart once, say, for instance, you know one of these?
That's part of my second attack, and I won't have time to do all of it. But I can show you the first little part of it. This is a representation of the key schedule for the 256-bit version. In the attack that I won't be talking about, we actually end up guessing most of the key bytes. We guess these bytes. Sorry, this is the cipher key. Each block is a direct function of the previous block. That's easy to compute. And we guess these key bytes here at the end. And now this key byte here is the sum of the key byte here and the key byte there. But I know this one, so I can compute that one. We keep applying that rule, and it turns out you can just compute these bytes. So if I guess these, I can compute those. And from these, I can compute these. And from these, I can compute those. And from this set, I can compute those three. So we have guessed 19 bytes, and we get all these bytes for free. So if you know a little bit about the rijndael key schedule, you actually know a whole bunch of extra bytes. And I'm not terribly happy about that, I must say. It doesn't lead directly to a weakness, but for example, the attack of 9 rounds wouldn't work if the key schedule hadn't been so very simple and linear. Any further questions? So I can't all see you because I'm staring into the overhead. Yes, that.
Just think what this system is the number attack.
Sorry, what can you read that?
Please explain what the advantage is of this kind of t-shirt for the 9-round attack.
Well, in the 9-round attack, like that, we actually end up guessing these key bytes. But then we get to know a whole bunch of key bytes here. We use them in our attack. So I actually use more knowledge about the keys than I spend in guessing. And guessing is expensive in cryptanalysis. Guessing is hard work. You need to have a loop over all possible values. Whereas if I can just compute it, it doesn't cost me nothing. Oh, the key schedule, sorry, the attack works on 9 rounds. It means it also works on 8 rounds and all fewer rounds. This is the key schedule for 2-bit, 6-bit keys. If you have 192-bit keys, then the blocks are this size. If you have 128-bit keys, the blocks are this size. I can't actually go into all the various versions of the key schedule here. I don't have time for that. I would suggest you look that up in the paper, in the original paper. So I'm almost out of time. And unfortunately, like I said, I can't tell you the details of the 9-round attack. To give you an idea what we do, we put the difference into the key and also difference into the plaintext. It's called a related key attack. There are even there for that practical situations in which you can do them. And you have those cancel out, and then a couple of rounds later, the difference comes in again. And the middle 6 rounds actually just equal to this 6-round attack here. So we gain 2 rounds at the front by a little bit trickery with the key schedule. And then the 9th and last round, we just guess the whole round key. There's only 128 bits to guess, whereas we have a 2-bit, 6-bit cipher. And so, if I can find the slide of our results, the final result takes 2 to the 224 steps. This is mind-bogglingly a large number. You will not be able to run this attack. But in cryptography, we generally call anything an attack that's faster than exhaustive search. You need some kind of standard, and any standard will do. I promised you some advice on which cipher to choose. And I'm going to restrict myself to the AES finalists. 62-bit block ciphers, I can't really advise anyone to use them because they have, you're limited to encrypting something like some tens of gigabytes before you get into real practical trouble with distinguishing attacks in some relations. The new crop of ciphers has been made by the best people in the world. They're a bit new, but I think this, one of the 5 finalists, there are some really good ones. Of the 5 finalists, 2 there are 3 that I like, and 2 that I like less. For those of you that know, Mars and RC6 will not be included in the rest of the thing. So I'm going to tell you the 3 ciphers are rijndael, serpent, and twofish. And I must say, depending on your situation, rijndael is the safest choice. Now, what is this guy babbling about? Because he's just been explaining how there are problems. rijndael is safe for your career. You won't get fired for choosing rijndael. And let's face it, if you have a wife and kids, that's an important consideration. Well, what do you care if the customers of your product have a problem 10 years from now? You want to have food on the table. rijndael is fast, it's available, it's approved by everybody, it's going to be everywhere. You're never going to have to explain to your customers what crypto system you're using. If they know anything, if they know about AES. If they don't know anything, you just say, this is the US government standard, and they'll think, okay, fine, good. So there are an enormous number of advantages to rijndael that are basically irrespective of the actual cryptographic security. And do not underestimate these advantages. There's an institutional momentum to these things, and it's going to be very hard. If you choose anything but rijndael, you have a lot of explaining to do. Now maybe within hackers it's easy to do, but in real world, as I may call it, that's not so easy to do. Now I have, like I mentioned, some doubts, some misgivings, I should say, about rijndael. It is, if 5 years from, if you told me that 5 years from now, somebody's going to dramatically break one of the AES finalists, and I mean, do an attack that really has effect on real world security, and I'm not talking about the 2 to the 240 attacks, but something you can actually run. I'm going to be least surprised for it to be rijndael. Now, there's probably a bunch of paranoids here, and if you want security, serpent is probably your best choice. It is the general consensus of all the cryptographers I've spoken to is that serpent is the most conservative block cipher of the finalists and probably of the reputable suggested block cipher as well. It's built like a tank. It has 32 rounds. The best attack is from 12 rounds. So the best attack doesn't even go halfway through the cipher. Nobody has even suggested a glimmer of hope of you fetching the cipher. The disadvantage is it's slow. And slow in comparison, it's about 3 times slower than rijndael, depending a little bit on your platform and the exact details. But still, rijndael runs at something like just a little bit faster than 20 clock cycles per byte on modern platforms. Serpent will, let's say it's 3 times slower. It depends very much on which platform. It's 50, 60 clock cycles per byte. If you pick 1 gigahertz machine, that's still pretty fast. But there's always people that complain about efficiency.
Just quickly, how does that compare with 3DES?
Sorry?
How do they compare with 3DES? You say Serpent is much slower, but how does that?
Yeah, there's still like twice as fast as 3 days if I got them, if I remember correctly. Well, that was one of the requirements that all the AES ciphers had to be as fast as the triple letters. Now, if you're paranoid and want to sleep well at night, Serpent is probably your best choice, but you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. And I can only advise twofish at this moment if, on the one hand, you want the speed of rijndael, on the other hand, you want to be more conservative than rijndael. I wrote here most of the security of Serpent. That is probably not quite the right formulation, because we don't really know what the security level of these ciphers is. Maybe I should have written something about conservativeness. rijndael is an aggressive cipher. They had a 6-round attack and they did 10 rounds. That I consider to be a pretty aggressive design. Serpent is a very conservative design. I consider two fish to be a fairly conservative design, not quite as conservative as serpent, but it is 2 to 3 times faster than serpent. Yes?
I have a big problem to understand why Serpent is a conservative design. I think Serpent is very secure because you do 32 rounds over the whole block. With 32 cycles, it would be comparable with 64 rounds of that. It's not really comparable, but they do a lot of work on the design of the linear function and also the design of the S-function S-box. Do you understand why AD is last? I think so.
Yes, but 32 rounds hides a lot of sin.
Okay, yeah.
This is a comment by Bruce. If you take students and then have them make ciphers, at 16 rounds, at 10 rounds, 16 rounds, they're usually very simple to break. At 32 rounds, they start to be decent. At 128 rounds, virtually any function is secure. Yeah, there are a couple of, if you have no nonlinearity at all, some algebraic effects, you might get into trouble. But Serpent doesn't have an obviously weak round function. It has lots of rounds. And if you actually try and attack it, and we have spent some time doing that, it's really hard. We go through like 10 rounds, and Ellie and his crew actually improved it to 12 rounds recently at Eurogroup. So this is my advice to which side to select. Now, that's the end of my talk, but I have something unrelated to talk about. This is something that happened even after I made my slides. Well, I wrote an article on HDCP, High Bandwidth Digital Content Protection Scheme by Intel. I found all the net, I found it kind of interesting, I started reading it. It broke while I read it. Can't help that. I wrote an article about it. I spoke to one of the lawyers of the EFF on Tuesday night. And I was told that for me to publish that paper here in the Netherlands, I live and work in Amsterdam. I did all my work in Amsterdam at home. If I put that paper up on the website, I might very well be either prosecuted or sued in the United States when I get there next weekend. I have decided not to publish my paper at the moment. Personally, I can't run the risk of being sued in the States. I have people that depend on me for financial support. I don't have a whole lot of money. I don't have a rich employer that will cover me. I can't run that risk. Well, so this is a practical effect of the DMCA law in the US. I'm not a citizen of the US. I happen to go there. I have some family there. I like to be able to go there. But the US Congress is telling me what I can and cannot say in my own country. I'm sure John will talk more about that just after me. I thought you might find this interesting to know.
Your tent right now, so.
Excuse me?
Is this paper in your tent right now? So
No, it is not. No, when I say I don't publish something, I mean that I'm not going to publish it. I do intend to create a little bit of a stink about it because, it's fundamental human right. I can't even stand here and talk to you about my work last week. That's a travesty. Why do they get the idea that they can tell me what to say?
But it's math, isn't it?
We looked it up, and there's actually Article 90 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is the country that always talks about human rights everywhere. But they have just trampled mine. I mean, I'm pretty pissed off at this. And I don't know exactly what will happen in the future. It's all very, this is a very recent development. And we'll see what happens. But I find myself caught. I can't afford the risk.
Well, the message got through.
Excuse me?
the message got through.
Yes, well, this is of course the preaching to the choir, but it's maybe not an sophisticated point.